The generator cut out at 11:40, and Reese Calloway was standing in my doorway 30 seconds later, holding a dead flashlight like it had personally betrayed her. "I need somewhere with power," she said. "I don't have power either. I have a dock and a very confused space heater. Then I need somewhere with company." I stepped back and let her in because the storm outside was throwing lake water sideways against the windows, and because Derek would have wanted me to, and also because some smaller and more honest part of me had wanted her to knock since the moment I saw her walk down to the docks that afternoon. The Restless was not built for company. It was a 40-foot houseboat I lived on and used as a floating workshop, engines torn half open on the back deck, tools bungeed down against weather, a bunk that folded out of the wall, and a lantern that ran on batteries I kept meaning to replace. Reese looked around at all of it and said, "This is either very charming or a fire hazard." "Both," I said. "Sit before you trip on a carburetor." She sat on the bench seat across from the little fold-out table, arms wrapped around herself, soaked from the dash between the main house and the dock. Lightning lit the windows white for a second, and she flinched, and I pretended not to notice because she would have hated that. I had known Reese since she was 9 and I was 11, since her father Walter Calloway bought the marina where my uncle already ran the repair shop, since our families got stitched together by proximity, the way small lake towns stitch everyone together, whether they like it or not. Derek Calloway was my best friend before either of us had a driver's license. His father built boat slips and brokered yacht deals and eventually owned half the waterfront. My family fixed what broke. That was the whole shape of it. The Calloways owned the water. We kept the engines running on it. Reese pulled her knees up onto the bench. "You're staring," she said. "I'm assessing whether you're going to be sick on my floor. I'm not going to be sick." "Good, because I just re-varnished that floor." She almost laughed, then didn't, like she'd caught herself doing something she wasn't supposed to. Outside, wind slammed something metal against a piling, and the whole houseboat rocked half an inch. She grabbed the table edge. "It's fine," I said. "She rides low. She's rode out worse." She, meaning the boat. She, meaning the boat, yes. Not you. You, I have no confidence in. Excellent bedside manner. I fix motors, not moods. She wrapped her hands around a mug I'd handed her, more for warmth than the coffee inside it, and looked down into it for a long moment before she spoke again. "My dad had Trent Bishop and his father over for dinner tonight," she said. "I know. I saw the cars. He wants to formalize something. Between Bishop Marine Group and us. A partnership." Reese looked up. "He's already decided the partnership includes me." I set my own mug down slower than I meant to. "Meaning what?" "Meaning he introduced me to Trent like I was part of the merger paperwork. Meaning he's been talking about a wedding like it's a groundbreaking ceremony. Meaning I said no, and my father said we'll discuss it when you've calmed down, like I was a toddler who didn't want her vegetables." The wind screamed past the windows, and neither of us said anything for a second. "That's not a partnership," I said finally. "That's a business plan with a bridesmaid dress." She actually laughed at that, short and surprised, like it had escaped before she could stop it. "Don't make me laugh right now. I'm supposed to be furious. You can be furious and amused. It's a skill. Is that a skill you have? It's the only skill I have. I fix engines and I make poorly timed jokes." She studied me for a second in the lantern light, and something in her face shifted, softened at the edges, the kind of look that made the boat feel smaller than it already was. "You've always done that," she said. "Made things lighter. Even when we were kids. Derek would be losing his mind about something, and you'd say one dumb thing, and suddenly it was fine. It's not a superpower. It's deflection with better marketing. Maybe I like the marketing." I didn't have an answer for that, so I got up to check the heater, which was the correct and cowardly thing to do, and that's when the boat rocked hard enough that a shelf let go behind me. A jar of fittings hit the floor and shattered, and I felt the sting before I understood what happened. A line of heat across the back of my hand where glass had caught it. Reese was up before I'd even registered it. "Don't move," she said, and there was no softness left in her voice, just focus, which surprised me more than the cut did. "It's fine. It's shallow." "Sit down, Mason." I sat, mostly because arguing with that particular tone felt like a bad use of remaining blood. She found my first aid kit without asking where it was, which meant she'd been paying attention to more of my life than I realized, and she cleaned the cut by lantern light with hands that were steadier than mine would have been. "You're good at this," I said. "I spent a summer volunteering at a marine rescue center. Mostly cleaning tanks, but they made us learn basic first aid in case a rescue went sideways." "I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know about me." She wrapped gauze around my hand, careful, unhurried. "My father thinks I spent that summer doing an internship at the yacht club." I told him that because the truth would have led to a conversation about my future involving a marine biology degree I'm not allowed to want. You want marine biology. I wanted it since I was 14 and touched a sea star at an aquarium and thought that I want to understand that. She tied off the gauze. Instead, I do social media for my father's company and smile at investor dinners and get introduced to men named Trent. That's not a life. That's a costume. She looked up at me, and for a second, neither of us moved. The rain kept hammering the roof, the lantern kept flickering, and something about the size of the space made every silence feel loud. "You're one to talk," she said quietly. "You inherited a repair shop and stayed exactly where everyone expected you to stay. I like fixing things. I'm not hiding from anything, aren't you?" She sat back on her heels. "You've been in love with this town and this dock and never left it. Some people would call that safe. Some people would call it home. Some people would call it fear with better lighting." That landed closer than I wanted to admit, and I didn't have a joke ready fast enough, which told her something too. The heater kicked back on with a low groan, the only sound for a while beyond the storm. Reese wrapped her arms around herself again, this time more from something else than the cold. "My dad thinks stability means control," she said. "He thinks if he arranges enough of my life, nothing bad can happen to it. I used to believe that too. Now I just feel like a spreadsheet with a birthday." I reached into a drawer without fully thinking about it and pulled out a length of paracord I used for rigging spare gear, and I started tying it, mostly to keep my hands busy, an old habit from working on boats where your hands need a job even when your brain is elsewhere. "What are you making?" she asked. "Nothing." Fidgeting. "It looks like a knot. It's an anchor bend. Measure twice, tie once," my uncle used to say, which makes no sense for a knot, but he said it anyway. I finished it into a loose bracelet without entirely meaning to and held it out to her, half joking, an offering with no real weight to it. "For luck," I said, "or for when Trent Bishop tries to discuss market synergy with you again." She took it and tied it around her wrist herself, slow, like it mattered more than either of us was saying out loud. "I've noticed you for longer than tonight," she said, not looking up from the knot. I know I should have said something reasonable back. Something about Derek, about her father, about the 12 years of history that made this a spectacularly bad idea. Instead, I said, "I've noticed you too," which was smaller than the truth, but the only version of it I could get out of my mouth. The heater cut out again a few minutes later, and this time neither of us got up to fix it. We sat close on the narrow bench with a blanket that smelled like engine grease, and somewhere near 2 in the morning, her head ended up against my shoulder and my arm ended up around her, and we fell asleep like that. Not because the storm forced it, but because neither of us wanted to be the one who moved first. I woke to knocking on the hull hard enough to rattle tools. Reese woke fast, disoriented, and then the door swung open before either of us reached it, because I never lock it, because who breaks into a boat full of engine parts? Walter Calloway stood in the doorway in a rain jacket, flashlight in hand, Derek right behind him looking like he hadn't slept either. Behind them, 2 dock hands had stopped on the walkway, doing a very poor job of pretending they weren't watching. "Reese?" Walter said. Her name came out flat and cold, the temperature drop of a man deciding how angry to be before he'd finished being surprised. "Dad," she started. "Get your things. Now." I stood up between them without fully deciding to. Walter's eyes cut to me, and I watched 12 years of a complicated but civil relationship recalibrate itself into something else entirely. "Nothing happened," I said. "I didn't ask you." Derek's jaw was tight. "Mason. I'm not going to lie to either of you." Walter's voice dropped lower, which was somehow worse than if he'd shouted. "You run a one-man repair shop out of a boat that should have been condemned 2 winters ago, and you think that qualifies you to keep my daughter out all night." "Dad, stop," Reese said. He didn't look at her. He looked at me like he was doing math. Some men look at what a girl like my daughter is worth and think there's a version of themselves that could earn it. There isn't. There's a difference between fixing an engine and fixing your life, and you've only ever managed one of those. The dock hands looked away like they'd heard something they shouldn't have. Derek's face had gone pale in a specific way I recognized from childhood, the way he looked right before he stopped being able to stay quiet. Reese stepped forward, voice shaking but steady underneath it. "Nothing happened last night except the power went out and he cleaned up a cut and we talked." That's the whole story. "I don't need the story," Walter said. "I need you dressed and off this boat in 5 minutes." She didn't move immediately, and something about that half second of stillness said more than either of us could have said out loud. "Reese?" Walter said again, sharper. "I'm coming," she said, and there was an apology buried somewhere in her voice that wasn't for him. I watched her gather her shoes and her jacket while her father stood in the doorway like he was guarding evidence, and I said nothing else, because anything else would have made it worse for her, and because some fights aren't yours to finish in the moment they start. Before she stepped past him onto the dock, she looked back at me. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "You don't have anything to apologize for. I know. I'm still sorry it happened this way." Then she was gone, down the dock in the gray early light, her father's hand not quite touching her shoulder, steering without touching, and Derek lingered half a second longer than the rest, gave me a look I couldn't fully read, and followed. I stood on my own deck for a long time after that, holding a coffee I didn't drink, feeling like something had been decided about me in a doorway before I'd said more than 4 sentences. 3 days passed before she texted. "Can we talk? Somewhere normal." We met at a diner off the highway, the kind of place with vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had opinions. She was already there when I walked in, turning a napkin into smaller and smaller pieces. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I wanted to." She looked up. My dad's furious. Derek's confused. My mom keeps asking careful questions like she's afraid of the real answer. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That nothing happened except a storm and a conversation and a knot you tied out of spare cord." She held up her wrist. "It's still there, in case you're wondering." I noticed. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Any of it. I regret the timing. I regret your father finding out standing in a doorway instead of hearing it from you on solid ground. I don't regret the conversation. I don't regret wanting you there." Her eyes changed at that, something in them loosening slightly. "I told him I won't marry Trent Bishop," she said. "I told him if the partnership needs a wedding, he can find another daughter to donate." How did that go? About as well as you'd expect from a man who thinks affection is a line item. We sat with that for a second, the diner noise humming around us, someone's radio playing low behind the counter. "I need to say something, and I need you to actually hear it," she said. "If we do this, it's not going to be quiet. My father doesn't do quiet. Derek's going to be caught in the middle, whether he wants to be or not. I don't want to be someone you keep in a back pocket because it's easier than the mess of doing this in front of everyone. I'm not interested in a back pocket version of you. Then what are you interested in? Doing this slow and doing it honestly and not pretending the cost isn't real just because I like you enough to ignore it." She almost smiled at that, tired but real. That's an oddly practical answer for someone who ties strangers into knots at midnight. "You weren't a stranger." "No," she said. "I really wasn't." For the next several weeks, we were careful in the specific way people are careful when they know exactly how much they have to lose. We met at a diner 2 towns over, at a hiking trail nobody from the marina crowd used, at a sandwich shop where the owner called everyone chief and didn't care who sat in the back booth. We didn't tell anyone beyond that. Derek found out anyway, the way people who love you always eventually do. He showed up at the dock one evening while Reese and I were eating takeout on the back deck of the houseboat, and he stood at the edge of it with his hands in his pockets like he wasn't sure whether to stay or leave. "How long?" he asked. "A few weeks," Reese said. He looked at me. "You couldn't have picked literally anyone else. I didn't pick her because it was convenient, Derek." "That's supposed to help?" Reese stood. "I'm right here. Stop talking around me like I got recruited into something." Derek exhaled hard, rubbed a hand over his face. "My dad's not going to let this go quiet. You know that, right? He's already talking about restructuring things with Bishop Marine, regardless of you saying no. If this comes out messy, it's not just you two who deal with it. It's the shop. It's the marina. It's every holiday we've ever spent together." "I know what it costs," I said. "Do you?" Derek said, voice sharp now. "Because from where I'm standing, you get to walk away from this if it goes badly. She doesn't. She loses the only life she's ever had." Reese's voice cut through, steady. "I know what I'm risking." "Do you actually think I haven't thought about that every single day?" Derek looked at both of us for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "I'm not going to say anything to Dad. Yet. But you two need to stop pretending hiding is a plan. It isn't. It's just fear with a calendar." He left without waiting for a response, and the takeout went cold on the deck while neither of us said anything for a while. The ambush came 2 weeks later. Reese called me from her car, voice tight in a way I'd learned to recognize. "Can I come over?" she asked. "Of course." "What happened?" "My father invited Trent Bishop to dinner tonight. Said it was casual. It was not casual." She arrived 20 minutes later and sat at my little fold-out table with her hands wrapped around nothing, just holding the shape of a mug that wasn't there. He announced at the table that Trent's expanding into a new marina up north and thought I'd want to see the operations side, like a tour, like I'm a job candidate for my own life. My mother kept refilling water glasses like that would fix anything. Derek left the table halfway through. Did you say anything? I said I wasn't interested. My father said interest wasn't really the point. Then afterward, he told me if I kept, in his words, embarrassing this family with a mechanic, he'd stop covering my tuition for the graduate program I haven't even started yet, my car insurance, my health plan, everything. I sat back, feeling something settle heavy in my chest. There it was, the leash, finally named out loud. I know how that sounds, she said quickly, like I'm spoiled. It sounds like you're scared. I am. Her voice cracked slightly. I don't want Trent. I don't want my father designing my life like a slip rental agreement. But I also don't know how to just not have the safety net I've had my entire life. I hate saying that out loud to you of all people. Why me of all people? Because you've never had one. You built everything yourself. You'll think I'm weak. I don't think you're weak, I said. I think you were raised in a system that made comfort feel like obedience. That's not the same thing. But it is something you're going to have to choose about. Eventually, honestly, not out of spite at your father. She looked at the paracord bracelet still on her wrist, turned it slightly. Can you handle knowing I'm scared of losing all of it? She asked. I could have promised her a life without hardship. It would have been easy, and it would have been a lie. I can't give you what your family gives you, I said. I can give you honesty and steady effort and a seat at a table that's smaller but real. I can't give you a graduate program by Friday. I'm not asking for that. Good. Then don't leap because you're angry at him. Anger doesn't hold. Choose it because it's actually what you want, on a day nobody's clapping for you. She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Okay. The marina's 25th anniversary gala came a month later, an event Walter Calloway had thrown every year since he bought the place, and one Reese couldn't skip without it becoming its own headline. I went because Derek asked me to, quietly, in a tone that suggested he'd rather I show up than let his father control the whole narrative uncontested. The dock was strung with lights, boats decorated, half the town in attendance. Walter held court near the buffet tables in a blazer that cost more than my truck, greeting guests like a man auditioning for mayor. Reese found me near the edge of the crowd, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. You, okay, I asked. No, but I'm here. Across the deck, Walter's voice rose slightly, enough to carry, the specific volume of a man performing for an audience. Reese, he called. Come say hello to the bishops. They were just asking about your graduate plans. Reese froze for half a second, then straightened and walked toward him, and I followed because staying at the edge felt like agreeing to something I didn't agree with. Walter's smile thinned when he saw me beside her. Ethan, he said, then caught himself. Mason. Forgive me. I forget names of people who work on the docks rather than own them. That's all right. I forget names of people who confuse ownership with character. A few nearby guests went quiet, sensing something shifting. Walter's jaw tightened. Reese stepped slightly in front of me, chin up. Dad, we need to stop doing this in front of people. Doing what, exactly? Walter said. Watching my daughter throw away a future for a man who fixes bilge pumps for a living? I felt the old shape of that insult land exactly where it was aimed, and I let it land without flinching, because giving him the reaction he wanted would have proven his point better than any comeback could. Reese's voice came out clear and even. He's not a bilge pump, Dad. He's not a merger you get to negotiate either. Walter turned fully to her. You think this is romance? This is a girl confusing rebellion for love. I think it's the first honest thing I've done in years, she said. Walter looked at me then, something colder settling into his voice, the kind of line a man saves for the moment he thinks it'll do the most damage. My daughter is not a fixer-upper for a man who spends his life repairing other people's boats because he can't afford one of his own. The words sat there in front of everyone close enough to hear them. I felt heat rise up my neck, but I kept my voice level because losing composure would have handed him exactly the proof he wanted. You're angry, I said. Fine, but you don't get to measure a person's worth by a slip fee. Walter's chin lifted. Then don't stand here acting like you belong at this table. I'm not a repair bill, Reese said, loud enough now that the nearby crowd had gone fully silent. And neither is he. Derek appeared at the edge of the group, jaw tight, saying nothing yet, watching his father with an expression that looked like years of complicated loyalty finally cracking. Walter's voice dropped, dangerous and quiet. If you walk away from this family's plans, don't expect this family to keep funding your experiments. Then stop funding them, Reese said. I'll figure out the rest. Walter blinked, genuinely thrown for the first time all night. What? I said stop. The words were simple. They were not small. Her fingers found mine without either of us planning it, and she held on. Reese, Walter said, less certain now. I love you, she said, quiet enough that it wasn't for the crowd anymore. But I can't keep living on your permission. Derek stepped forward finally, looked between his father and his sister, then at me. You heard her, he said, and something in his voice had shifted from warning to resignation. Take care of her. We left the gala together while Walter stood rigid near the buffet tables, the party slowly resuming its low murmur around him, everyone pretending not to have heard everything. Reese moved 2 suitcases and a box of books into the houseboat over the following week. Not everything, just enough to start somewhere real. It wasn't cinematic. She cried in the shower once, thinking I couldn't hear the water running longer than it needed to. She learned what a budget actually looked like when her name was the only one on it. She argued with her father by text until she eventually stopped responding to most of it. We had our first real fight over money 3 weeks in, when she bought a replacement bilge pump online without checking the price first, a nicer model than we needed, twice what I would have paid. I came home, saw the receipt, and made a face before I could stop myself. Say it, she said. I didn't say anything. You made the face. I don't have a face. You have an extremely specific face. It's like a disappointed marine surveyor. Reese, we talked about checking prices before big purchases. It's a pump. It's a pump that costs more than a week of groceries. Her eyes flashed. I'm not stupid. I didn't say you were. You looked at that receipt like I torched the budget. I looked at it like we have rent, I said, and watched her arms cross tighter. Do you want me here? She said, or do you want a roommate who never makes a mistake? That stopped me cold. I took a breath. I want you here, I said. I also want us to be honest that this part isn't easy yet. I'm trying, she said, quieter now. I don't know all the rules. They're not rules. They're just survival math. She looked away, embarrassed and angry at once. I hate this. I know. No, I hate being bad at normal things. That undid me faster than anything else could have. I walked closer. You're not bad at normal things. You're new to some of them. We returned the pump, bought the one we actually needed. It worked fine. Survival math became our private joke after that, whenever a purchase needed a second look. She got a part-time research assistant position at a small marine conservation nonprofit 2 months later, low pay, but entirely hers, no Calloway money attached to it. She came home the first day with sore feet and a proud, exhausted smile, and told me about a tank malfunction she'd helped fix and a coworker named Marge, who terrified the director. We built something slow and unglamorous and real, mismatched furniture and cheap dinners and long conversations that didn't require hiding from anyone. Walter came to the dock alone on a Saturday morning, 3 months after the gala. Reese was making coffee when I opened the door and found him standing on the walkway in a windbreaker, looking smaller outside of his own marina than I'd ever seen him. May I come aboard? He asked. Reese came up behind me, barefoot, wearing one of my old shop shirts, and looked at her father for a long moment before answering. Sure, she said. Walter stepped in carefully, taking in the boat properly for what looked like the first time, the tools, the modest space, the grocery list taped to a cabinet. Nothing impressive and nothing shameful either. Nobody offered him coffee. It wasn't cruelty. It was just honesty. Derek's still furious with me, he said finally. Good, Reese said. Your mother's disappointed in how I handled things. That sounds accurate. He turned to me, and I braced for another version of the doorway insult. Instead, he said, I owe you an apology. I didn't help him along. I needed to hear it plainly. At the anniversary gala, and before that, I measured your worth by what you could provide materially, and treated that measurement like it was fact. It was arrogant. It was cruel. It was wrong. Reese's eyes filled, but she stayed quiet, letting him finish. I told myself I was protecting her from a hard life, Walter said. Then your friend Derek asked me whether I wanted her safe or obedient, and I didn't like that I couldn't answer it cleanly. What did you answer? Reese asked softly. I didn't, he admitted. That was the problem. He looked at me directly. I'm not sorry because this boat turned out nicer than I expected, or because you've proven useful. I'm sorry because I should have judged your character before I judged your income. I nodded once. Thank you, I said. Reese's voice shook slightly. You made me feel like loving him made me cheap. Good, Walter said. Some words should land, I know. And you made him stand there in front of half the marina while I discussed him like inventory. I know, Walter said. He isn't. No, she said. He isn't. I still want you in my life, she told him. Walter's composure finally cracked, just slightly, just enough. I want that too, he said. They hugged awkwardly in the small kitchen, and I looked away because that moment wasn't mine to witness closely. When he left, he paused at the door. "I'll do better," he said. "We'll see," Reese answered. "Fair," Walter said, and then, looking at me, "Take care of each other." "We are," I said. Almost a year after that storm, we drove past the marine supply store and saw a rack of paracord on sale near the checkout counter. Reese pointed at it. "We should get more of that," she said. "In case of future emergencies requiring bracelets." That's a dangerous historical reference. "Probably," she said. "I'm not against repeating history a little." I reached over and took her hand. The same wrist, the same knot still holding after a year of daily wear. "I choose this," I said. "All of it. Not because it's easy and not because your father finally approved. Because it's you." She looked at me for a long moment. "Then I choose it too," she said. "Starting now and every ordinary day after this one." We didn't need an audience for that part. We'd already had one, once, and it had cost us both plenty to stop performing for it. Would you have taken her hand in front of both families, knowing exactly what it would cost you? And do you think Walter earned that apology? Or does some damage stay done no matter how many years pass after it? If you liked the video, subscribe to my channel.